Okay, so welcome to today's session. Before we start the session, I want to do a very quick presentation on the Edge program and what we've done with students' accommodation. So basically, Edge is IFC's Green Building Market Transformation Program. And the whole idea is to take a leadership role in encouraging a new paradigm where financial institutions, governments, property sector, and all the consumers come together to benefit financially through the mainstream of green buildings. The program tends to address the gaps in the market for international green building standards that offers a free software solution to help identify the most cost-effective solutions to design and then build it green. And then we also look at working on green building codes and incentives. And then the last bit is the certification program itself. So far, IFC has mobilized close to 4.5 billion in green building investments, some from our own accounts and then others from syndicated loan. Out of that, we have 876 million or 20% of all of these investments that is done through other financial institutions. IFC believes that the business case for green building is a win for all. Are you going through the slides, Gideon?
You'll see there's a next button at the bottom.
Oh, okay. So I can change myself. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so the Edge program comes in three formats. It's a free software, it's an achievable standard, and it's a verified green label. It's an achievable standard by saying we expect 20% improvement in the energy performance and water, and then 20% improvement in the embodied energy and material. The free software helps designers or architects to be able to choose what works best for them. You are able to find out what is actually going to make your project to be green. And you are also able to see the cost implications of the projects that you do. And once you meet the standard, you are able to get the certificate, which you can use to brand your project. Now, Edge is a part of Quantify International Definition of a Green Building. We believe that there should be an easy way to understand what a green building is. And for us at IFC, we believe it should, first of all, be certified green by a third party. And this third party needs to be independent because most of the times we hear people say their building is green, however, it hasn't been certified. And that is one thing that we try to look out for. And then secondly, as I mentioned, we're looking at 20% better performance than the local baseline. The local baseline being that where you are putting out that project, how do people usually build? And can we show that your project is at least 20% better in terms of performance when you compare it to the way other people build? And then the last bit is quantified impact reporting. We expect that if your project is green, you should be able to give us the numbers. We are financial institutions and we really work with numbers. So you should be able to let us know that, okay, this is how much energy is being saved, how much carbon emissions are being avoided and all that. Yeah. And the certificate itself is able to show you exactly what has been saved, what measures were used, and this helps to it helps to educate people to see what makes the building to be green. Now, Edge is aligned with all the international green finance standards for green buildings, and today we would actually get to hear a bit more from Acorn on how they were able to raise their bond with the help of Edge. And I'll skip this because we will be talking about it later in our panel discussion. However, it's worthy to note that Acorn was able to raise about $50 million using their certified student accommodation. And I also want to talk about another student housing project in Abuja. This was recently certified, and it's being done by Greenwich, and they are also looking at raising funds on the market on the back of their Edge education. There is another project in South Africa. This was certified a while back, sometime last year, and they also put in some green measures, and they are also trying to raise funds in the market. So it's become quite a trend where student accommodation is now looking at doing things out of the ordinary. They don't want to do it as business as usual. They are looking at making some changes to their business model. But if you look at Edge in general, I mean, within the region, Kenya and then East Africa, you see that we are growing. There are a lot of projects coming on board, not just within East Africa, but then across the continent. You'll be able to have more information on the sort of projects that have been certified when you check our website, which is www.edgebuilders.com. You'll be able to see the project studies. Not every project has a project study, but a majority of projects that are certified have a project studies. And this project study kind of help increase awareness on the project. It helps give it some brand visibility, and also to help people to understand what makes a project to be green, what measures were put in there for that project to be green. And what we've also seen is that banks are, gradually coming up with some incentives to catalyze the market. And it's very interesting for us because we believe that the financial incentives that are provided, it helps developers to be able to get their projects done. We've seen the likes of ABSA coming up with an eco loan, not across Africa though. This is only related to, it's restricted to South Africa. We are hoping they will extend this to other parts of the world, other parts of Africa. We've seen a lot of banks in Southern America also coming up with very good incentives. Africa, we are speaking with a few other banks. I'm sure very soon you would have a lot more incentives from banks in Africa to provide the incentive for green building. When it comes to governments, they are also doing their best to provide incentives, which is also very interesting because in our part of the world, governments are strong, and once a policy is made, it helps to direct the market. A very good example is in Kenya, where we just recently had the decree that all affordable housing should meet the Edge requirements, right? That helps really incentivize the market, right? Well, and then I also want to make a note that with Edge, once the project is certified, we help extend marketing support to the project. So there are quite some stuff that we will do for you. Apart from you doing the submission of a project study, we help brand the project. We launch a social media campaign for you. We help publish your story. And all of this is, even though we will support you do that, the developer has to take the lead once you are ready, because some developers wouldn't want to push so much on this for their own reasons. So once the developer gives us the go ahead, we go all out to help support this project. We've seen projects where they actually put billboards on their site to announce that they are they are Edge certified, and that sometimes have an impact on their sales. Right. I'll end by stating that the Edge program is donor funded, and we are currently using funds from the UK government and then from SECO. Right. Thank you. So we'll go to the panel discussion. So this morning we have three very distinguished professionals. We would be discussing student accommodation, turning the tide, and we would take an emphasis on the ACCOMMODATION project to see what they've done and how other projects around the sub-region can also take advantage of. I would ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, tell us, very quickly what they've been doing, their background, and yeah, basically. So maybe we will start with Rangav.
Thanks, Dennis. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been a real estate professional now for almost 15 years with a lot of experience across emerging markets. I have worked right across the value chain from fundraising investments and then on to development and asset management. I have, over the past 2 years, almost 2 years, I have established a consultancy, and this year in particular, my main focus has been in helping Acorn Holdings with the establishment of 2 REITs that they are keen to launch towards the end of this year.
Great. Okay, so can we hear from Elizabeth?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Wangeshi Shege. I'm the chairperson of the Kenya Green Building Society. I'm also the vice chairperson of the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council. Those roles are volunteer. I'm a consultant in the sustainable development industry, and I've been doing that for over 20 years in showing that climate action is definitely can be done through green buildings. And it's actually growing the momentum from grassroots level to where we are now, and looking at the finance issues as well, so that Africa can take advantage of the opportunity to actually mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Great. And can we move to Wangui? Okay, so it seems Wangui is having a problem with her line.
Sorry, I think my internet got disconnected.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Wangui.
Okay, so Wangui left the room again. Let's go ahead. Let me start with Rangav. So in other parts of the world, you mentioned you have a lot of experience in REITs. What we've seen is that in other parts of the world, it's become a very useful investment tool. Do you think there's some benefits in applying this to student housing in East Africa? And what are these benefits that you see?
You're talking.
I'm sorry. Before we go, I think Wangui is back.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening to the internet in the office. So hello, everyone. My name is Wangui Maranga Okello. I've been working with Acorn for the last 2 or so years. Very, very exciting times. Structuring the green bond, East Africa's first green bond. So that was very exciting for us. And we are currently now structuring the first green REITs with Ragab. We're really doing quite a bit as part of our sustainability agenda, getting the green buildings on board for affordable student accommodation. And that's what we're up to now. In the last 16 or so years, I've been in the fund management industry in Kenya and have been working one of the largest fund management companies, just doing a multi-portfolio asset management for pension schemes and life funds.
Great. Okay, so Ranga, would you want to go ahead with your answer to the question? Yeah.
Sure, Dennis, not a problem. In terms of your question about the usefulness of REITs for student housing, I would say that they're extremely useful. In fact, I would say that they're useful generally for all forms of housing because of their fundamental features, which lend itself more to income generating assets and generating assets. I think particularly where you've got an inherent gap in supply, I think REITs also offer incentives, and I'll touch upon those. So the first reason I would say that it's important that sorry, there's some element of background noise.
Hello?
Yeah, no. No, what I was saying is that, look, REITs provide access to long-term capital, and I think that's obviously very important for when you're building out a platform at scale, which one needs to do when there's a substantial housing gap, and I think that's key. I think they're also, as I mentioned, essential for where you find there's a demand supply mismatch in terms of the requirement. And the reason also for that is that REITs offer inherent tax incentives. And if you want to plug any demand or housing gap, it's important that you motivate and incentivize developers to come on board and give them motivation to fulfill the development requirement, which nothing matches that than a few tax breaks, right, for any institution. And then I think the other thing that REITs are important for are that they attract institutional players, right? When you get institutional players at the supply side, i.e. developers, what you then tend to do is you enhance interest from sophisticated investors, right? Because sophisticated investors want to typically work with institutional players. And when you have sophisticated investors on board, then that tends to obviously expand the capital markets and generally develop a certain level of maturity, which then becomes like a virtuous cycle, right? The more sophistication, the more maturity there is in the market, the more capital will come in, and more capital comes in, the more you can develop, and so forth. So I think that's why REITs are extremely important.
Great. And I'll come back to you on some of the tax incentives you mentioned, but let me go to Wangwe. For Acorn, what really informed the decision to opt for a green bond to finance the student accommodation?
Thanks, Dennis. Well, it's Acorn's agenda on sustainability has always been very critical. It's a top of the agenda. And, as was mentioned earlier, our mandate and our objective is really to provide student accommodation, affordable student accommodation to the youth in Nairobi and the rest of Kenya eventually. And in that, the green design was really important as part of having efficient buildings and having efficient buildings and future-proofing these buildings in the future. So we decided that we had to have an external verification of our green buildings. That was always part of the agenda, just to show our commitment to the public of our sustainability agenda. So when we were going to the market to look for financing, we saw we needed to get commitment of financing for a couple of our projects. And so we thought that a corporate bond would be the best option to get a large pool of funds. And having a green label on that bond was really just a natural progression because it was part of our objectives anyway. So it was just a natural progression to putting a green label on that. Yeah.
Okay. And were there any challenges with the issuance of the green bond?
Oh no, we had a fantastic team. Transaction providers, our legal. We internally we had a great team we worked with. We also worked very well with our regulators. Everybody was really on the same page on getting this bond on the ground and get it successful. So I would say that from CMA to Garantco, FSDA, we work very well with the Green Bonds, Kenya Green Bonds program, with Elizabeth and her team at KGBS. We were all on the same page. So in terms of the challenges of getting this bond, that it was not such a challenge. Now the challenge was actually making the market aware of what is a green bond, what is the benefit of a green bond, why do you need a green bond in the first place. So that was the challenge, and I think there needs to be a lot more education awareness on what a green bond is and its benefits, because even when we went to market, it did not, having a green label did not really have any effect on the pricing, So again, we do need to do a lot more in terms of education awareness, just so that the investors appreciate the value of having a green bond as opposed to a regular bond.
Okay, great. So that leads me on to my next question to Elizabeth. As Wangwe mentioned, benefits were not so clear to investors, right? So you being the chairperson of the Kenyan Green Building Council, Society, what do you think makes certified housing, student housing more attractive? And how can we be able to educate the public for them to put some more premium on certified green student accommodation compared to the ordinary student accommodation?
Thank you for that. I'd like to first of all acknowledge ACON. ACON Holdings are premium members of the Kenya Green Building Society, so they're walking the talk. And with the Green Building Councils, are membership based, and the work we do is based on voluntary members who are doing this. So a lot of it, especially for investors, the question I normally ask is, what's the basis of your investment and development? Because once you receive that funding and you want to actually invest in any development, even beyond student housing, but focusing on student housing, what building code, what standards are you using to develop your building? So we know that Kenya has been reviewing its building code for quite a while. And the one that's actually active is dated in the 1970s. We've been reviewing that, and it's actually going through the parliament, rigorous review, etc. But because that takes time, by the time it's complete, we need to already be innovating in the construction industry. So what we've seen in the Kenya Green Building Society and in the region as well is that these standards, like IFC Edge standard, provides that up-to-date, responsible development standards and guidelines that will guide the whole team towards a common goal. And the common goal for the green buildings is definitely climate responsive development. And I like that a few good things have been mentioned already. Future proofing, because if you don't build green now, in a few years, when the regulations catch up, your building will be obsolete and you'll have to go back and refurbish, which we've seen costs more money. Second, you need to be part of the solution. Africa is going to be hit hardest with the climatic effects, and we are feeling it. We've seen what's been happening around the region. In Kenya, we do feel the extreme droughts, extreme flooding, infrastructure going down, etc. So why not be part of the solution? And the solution is actually here at your doorstep. Previously there was perception that building green was expensive. That I would say that perception is more than 20 years old at this point, because building green is where we should be starting. And I normally say, shift your triple bottom line to be realistic. The best thing we have is our climate. So climatic response as well is the first thing before we even add any artificial elements. And we don't see that being taken advantage of quite a lot in the developments. So for the investor, having guidelines that actually stipulate how to build green, you get climatic responsive design, future-proofed buildings, and also what we allow for in these buildings and in the process for an investor is there's awareness. So you might have a team that isn't extremely experienced, but through the process, that team at the end of it will be highly experienced, and there's skills being passed on as well. And you're actually transforming the market. That with your first development, there's, yes, lessons learned, but with that, there's a lot more. If we look at the demographic, 70% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is actually youth. And the buildings that we'll have by 2050 haven't been built yet. So if you're not building for the youth and you're not involving them, then you're really, targeting a very small percentage. And the opportunity is actually to do it right. If we're building our future cities now, that includes the student housing, you should build green. Last but not least, for investors as well, for consideration, is that independent assessment. That makes a huge difference. So for the structure with Kenya Green Building Society, we signed an MOU with IFC Edge back in 2017. And the certifiers are still the main certifiers. We have GBCI, run by the US Green Building Council. And also there's ThinkStep SGS, who are in the market. With that, we've also developed, since 2017, we didn't have even one edge expert in the country. We're now talking about 32. And by the end of this year, we're looking for, we know there's more. This COVID times, people are staying at home and studying and getting up to speed. So we know we'll have more of them. And we have local auditors as well. And we're looking to augment that so that as much as the momentum and the movement around green buildings is developing, the tools are actually readily available. And you can see why the State Department would actually enable this through that decree, that the minimum standard for affordable housing should actually be the IFC Edge standard. Thank you.
Great, great. So, from what Elizabeth is saying, what it means is maybe the KGBS and ACCOMMODATION should have worked a bit more closely to improve the education and awareness at the time that the bond was being launched. Maybe that would have created a bigger impact for me. Yes, but let me just ask a follow-on question to Wangui. The fact that the projects were going to be EDGE certified, did that really have an effect on the bond? Were there any other tax benefits that you got for issuing the green bond as well?
Dennis, as I mentioned to you, there has been a lot of positive. There's been a lot of positivity in green building design, both from the regulator point of view and also from the market in general, even though, as I mentioned, it hasn't, the education is still coming up, but there's still been a very, very good, quite a bit of goodwill coming through. And one of the things that we did get was an exemption of withholding tax on interest income that investors get from the green bond. So that was a key incentive, and it just adds on to your investment return. So that was very positive.
Great, great. So Raghav, you've been involved in all of these, and in your work with the REITs, how do you think it would affect the supply of student housing, especially considering the era we are in? I don't know if it's post-COVID-19 or we are still within COVID. Yes. How is it going to affect supply of student housing if we look at REITs?
Okay, so I'll try and answer that question in two parts. And I think it's better to start at the macro level first. And I will refer to what Elizabeth mentioned, which I thought was a fantastic point, which is that the buildings that we're building are not yet built. You know, the requirement that is there in 2050 is not there yet. And I think that is what I'm going to piggyback off on for the purpose of making that first point, that macro point. If you look at the majority of universities, not just in Kenya, but I think within Africa, a lot of them are overcrowded, right? So the capacity that these universities have is not sufficient for the demand that they're facing, right? And this then has a follow-on effect to student housing. The supply of, let's say, university-provided housing is not sufficient. So what is happening with a lot of these kids, these students, is that they're having to live further and further away from where they study. And so by the time they get to their location, their university, they're having undertaken, you know, an hour-long tiring commute, which is obviously not the best form that they should be turning up to when they're going to go through a day of academia, right? So you've got undercapacity universities, you've got undercapacity that leads on to student housing, and I think that's what points to the requirement for student housing in the long term, right? Even now, till date, I believe that you've got less than 10% of students that are enrolled in tertiary education across Africa. That, to me, points to a huge roadmap going forward to the number of students that you are likely to attract as you go forward. And frankly, I think, you know, based on the analysis that we've done at ACCORN, we've seen that over the last 2 decades, that the growth rate of student enrollment is over 13%, the annual growth rate. And that's not looking like it's slowing down at any point, right? So I think, so you've got this macro requirement that I don't think is going away, regardless of whether COVID is here or not and what its impact is. Now, the second point, which specifically addresses COVID, I think right now, because of the times that we're in, you know, it's not been the greatest of years. There's a lot of uncertainty and let's say anxiety. A lot of that is being fed into sentiments into, oh, you know, housing or demand for real estate is going to go down and this and that. I actually have a counter opinion to that. To me, if anything, COVID has provided more backing or a substantiation to the requirement of institutional provision of student housing, right? I think what we've realized, and frankly, we've experienced it during this call as well, with some of the breakages or interruptions that we've had, is that the supply, the kind of electricity distribution is not great in the continent, because that's part and parcel of being in an emerging market. You know, the infrastructure is weak, and these are 2 key things that a student requires if he is to be able to, as they say, study from home, right? Having constant outages is not going to be beneficial for their learning requirement. On top of that, when you're at home, you know, if you're sharing a dining table with 2 other siblings, you can imagine there's going to be a number of distractions, right? And then lastly, I would say that you know, human beings, but I would say definitely young adults and students, are social beings, right? They've spent 18 years under the shelter of their parents. Once they hit 18, they want to move out. They want to experience the world. They want to experience independence for themselves. And that's why, you know, when you combine all those factors, I feel that there's a strong argument for the need for student housing. But I think I think what COVID has done is, you know, it's not just, hey, look, the underlying demand is there, and so you've got to take it casually. I think the point that needs to be highlighted vis-a-vis COVID's impact is that it is going to be the institutional providers of student housing which will who will differentiate themselves from, let's say, the kind of mom and pop outfit, right? Or the single apartment rental housing model that has been there, because you need to provide not just students, but more importantly, the parents, the comfort that you have implemented health and safety measures to counter for this onslaught of COVID that we've seen over the last few months. And I personally believe, and you know, if you visit our properties, you'll see that part and parcel of everyday living. I personally believe that it is the institutional players who can show and give that comfort to stakeholders that, look, we've implemented these measures, which should give you the comfort that when kids are here, they're going to be safe and healthy.
Great. From all these, I think I would say Acorn is kind of leading the way in Kenya. Elizabeth, what do you think will have to change in Kenya and East Africa as a whole to have more successful case studies like that of Acorn in the student housing space?
Wow, we have a great opportunity because I do believe we're starting with something that's actually tangibly there. You know, it's not theoretical. Acorn have done it. And if they can do it, let's learn from it. And you did mention the element of awareness. So the onus is on us, first of all, to create more awareness, you know, from basic understanding of what a green bond is, all the way to how to have more green bonds in the country. You know, the challenge was there many years ago, and we used to point to Nigeria and say, if they have a sovereign green bond, why don't we have one? And those are the kind of questions at the green building councils we ask, and we say, okay, where do we need to change and, you know, turn towards that? And I really applaud Acorn for doing that. Congratulations, because it has changed the conversation. But in changing it, we have more work with awareness, and it's awareness at all levels, from universities, and I know that we're also looking at IFC Edge program for the universities in Kenya and the region as well, so that this is inherent and ingrown. The students who are living in this affordable housing or student housing will be aware of their environment, of their built environment and the impact. So there's the climate action element as well. So for example, like Kenya has the National Climate Change Action Plan, and in there's, you know, the housing requirements and settlement requirements. So directly we're fitting in as Acorn with the student housing that's responding to climate, fitting in with the action in the National Climate Change Action Plan. So it's not removed, it's not something different. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is definitely COVID has brought to the forefront the whole thing about health and well-being in buildings. So having the building there, the architects, I think it's Bugapman and Partners who actually designed the student housing, incorporating that from the onset. We now as Kenya Green Building Society can actually showcase that. And we would like the media, journalists to even learn from this so that the conversation changes. Last but not least, resources and circularity that have been considered. And the resources themselves are how you operate this student accommodation. There's no point in building fantastic student accommodation and the students can't afford, or their parents can't afford. So that utility resource conversation is actually, the nail is hit on the head by actually building green, building the student housing green. But I feel that the first thing is awareness at all levels. Policy, etc., they need to know as well. The government needs to know. And most of the times, the government, as they come on board, it's because they might not be aware of the importance or the link around this. So we've always said, look, we have a common language, the SDGs. And with the World Green Building Council, we've actually showcased what SDGs are met directly by building green. So if the financial sector is hell-bent on using the SDGs as their discussion language, and the corporates are looking at that of how they meet the SDGs, we link these green building benefits to the SDGs so that they can see directly how they benefit from that. But we'd like to, welcome you on board on the basis of creating more awareness, especially for the next few years, because it's an uphill task. but we can do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I believe awareness is really, really needed because, I mean, even if the students' accommodation are built green and the students do not understand or know how to use these facilities, you still may end up having very high utility bills or high water bills and all that. So the awareness creation for the users is very important, as well as for the public as well. So it's very important. Well, Wangui, so just to round up, can you highlight some of the lessons that other student housing developers can take from your experience?
Well, we've come through quite a bit of a journey. You know, at ACCON, we're not looking at putting one building and moving away. We're not in the speculative or opportunistic development side. We are here to stay. We are here to provide proper housing for the youth in Kenya for the long haul. And so for that, it needed quite a bit of structure, an operating platform that will be able to deliver these projects in a big way, in a most efficient manner, and obviously at the most optimal investment returns. So for 4 years, it cost a lot of money and it cost a lot of time, resources, putting in the right capital, the right people, the right systems. So I would tell developers, especially the ones that want to be there for the long haul, is that it'd be very important to put the right structures in place from the get-go if you want to be there in the long term, for the long term, because real estate is a long-term game anyway. You need a lot of patient capital, you need long-term capital, and that's why for us, the capital markets is extremely important for us, because we will be calling on investment capital, pools of capital from these markets to be able to build these buildings, to be able to continue with our build plan and be able to actually cater for the huge supply gap that is currently in the market. So for us, I would say those are the things. You just need to have a very good base in terms of your operational capacity, your human resource capacity. Look for the right partners, especially long-term strategic partners who think the same, have the same vision as you, and also very important is to have the right capital at the beginning, whether it's debt or equity. It's very important to be able to get that capital at the very beginning of this project.
Great. Very valuable lessons. And for Rangav, what do you think? Do you think it's easy? It will be easy to replicate ACCON success across Africa, or even in Kenya? If you're just looking at Kenya, do you think we can get other developers doing similar stuff?
No, I think Dennis, if I was to say it was easy, I think I would be somewhat diminishing the achievements that ACORN has made over the last few years. So, I don't say this only because I'm consulting them. I genuinely do believe that I don't think it's easy. I think it is possible to replicate it, but it's not easy. And I think it's from the limited time that I've had the fortune of working with ACORN, what I've seen is a lot of hard work, a lot of kind of investment, a lot of grit to persevere with what are not necessarily the easiest things to implement, and particularly to what both Elizabeth and Koi have mentioned. When you're focused so hard on sustainability and it's not the easiest thing, because you sometimes do get pushback for a variety of reasons, whether it's financial implications, whether it's the feasibility, the viability of it. But to persevere, I think that's something that's commendable. But like I said, requires a certain level of conviction in your beliefs to persevere with that. I think Corey mentioned a couple of things with respect to permanent capital and and institution patient capital. Sorry, for me, I think what I've noted as what is required or essential to be able to try to replicate the business model. I'd give you two additional factors. One is just putting aside what type of capital it is, just the fact that you have access to capital, because as we all know, real estate is a very capital intensive business, that in itself presents a significant barrier to entry. So I think that is very essential for people looking to try and come into the industry. I think the second thing I would say, which is a little bit on the softer side, is that there is a need for institutional level thinking, right? Acorn, from a very early stage, when it began its journey, its current guise of provider of rental housing for the young people of Kenya and then possibly beyond. They came at it with a mindset that they wanted to build a platform, right? A platform that was focused on establishing an integrated real estate model, which is key for I would say, developing and managing rental housing at scale, right? And then they went about putting the different pieces of the puzzle in terms of development management, property management, investment management, those different aspects to ensure that they established a foundation which was the right one, the appropriate one to tackle their long-term strategic needs. And that, to take on board Koi's point, that requires a certain element of patience, not just from you as the implementer, but also from your backers, from your investors, to be patient, to stick to it, right? It's all part of a bigger picture, and you have to persist on that basis. It's not, I don't believe that in the first few years, anyone at Acorn would say that it was easy, what they were, what journey they were on. But because they stuck to it, they are at a stage now where you can see that, that growth phase, not that they haven't grown before, but that exponential growth that they see in front of them as a result of the hard work to establish those foundations.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So for Elizabeth, you within the green building space, what do you think would be the future of student housing? What changes are you envisaging or are you hoping would happen in the next few years to come?
I do hope that that not in the next few years to come, but immediately, if anyone is building now, they should immediately build green, first of all. Second to that is, I do note that in our industry, the real estate industry, sometimes the focus is on the commercial buildings for anything that would be innovative, and so a little bit towards residential, but that's quite recent because of the Big Four agenda. Student housing has been forgotten. And when we talk about student housing, and I like that you mentioned about the universities as well, even where the students spend most of their time in the universities, and even schools are forgotten. So it's an element that's bringing to the forefront to say, we really need to consider where our highest population are spending most of their time. It's either in the student housing or in the universities. So I don't want to push it to the regulators, to the governments, because it's our own responsibility. What I'd actually implore is the financial sector. The financial industry needs to come up with very innovative products for this space. And this is the first time that we're actually tackling this access to green finance and for green buildings, while showcasing what Acorn have gone through. So in a few years, we'd like to see that we have more than, we've been celebrating this first green bond from January, but quite quickly, we'd like to see more in the market. And I look forward to the green rate as well that the team is working on. And also for a lot of the developers to come forward and say, yes, if we're developing green, it has to be, if we're developing student housing, it has to be green. But the universities themselves, they have a responsibility of where the students are staying. If we expect them to perform, and with the kind of student housing I've seen around Nairobi, for example, it's implorable that we're actually letting that situation continue. So even the universities, the institutions themselves, they have a responsibility to actually say, if our students are going to be in your housing, it must be green. And if you're building for us, it must be to this standard, because it's been shown by ACCON that it can be done, and they'll continue showing that. And we'll continue working with ACCON and similar developers as well.
Okay, great. So I'll give you an opportunity to.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah,
If I could just add on to
that's fine.
point.
Go ahead.
There was something that she said about the need for green, and Elizabeth, you had said something at the beginning that it's very important for other developers to note that there was that misconception for a very long time that green buildings are expensive, and therefore there's no point of going. We already are, the developers' margin is already decreasing, etc. But we can say from experience, from our point of view, we've been developing green buildings. We now have 4 that are operational, and we have a pipeline of 6 on the ground in various stages of the development stage. And we can say from experience that it is actually not expensive to green. The green designs are not that much more expensive than traditional designs. And in fact, for us, we are hardly seeing any not much difference, and so it is not a barrier in terms of the financial output to get your buildings green. But even financially, there's the financial impact going forward that, as you mentioned, Elizabeth, the future proofing is there, and even the operational costs of running the building you can actually see the savings in our NOI that come through because our buildings are green. So it is a financial advantage to have green buildings over and above the sustainability agenda. So it is something that I would invite all developers to just think, whatever you're doing, whether it's residential, student, or commercial, it is actually of a financial advantage to go green.
Great. And I would also want to ask ACCON, it would be great if we can have you write your story. So for these projects that have been certified green, let's submit a project study so people can learn from it, right? Because it helps to lead the way, and then people will see that, okay, if ACCON did it this way, and this is how much it actually cost them, then we can also do it. Because like you said, it's one of the barriers. People feel that, well, it's an unnecessary expense that they wouldn't want to incur. But they seeing what you've done would make them, rethink that mindset, right? So Raghav, would you also want to have any last words before we summarize and then end the session?
No, I would say that, I think there's a lot of scope, a lot of opportunities to work together, both with regulators and industry bodies. I think for ACORN, the focus is very much on continued sustainability development. It's something that we feel very passionately about. In fact, we feel so passionately about it. It's not just about the buildings themselves that we want to have some level of green certification. We're now also focused on having some level of certification, whatever is possible, for our investment vehicles as well. So we want to actually permeate it as an ethos right across our organization, and I think that's in recognition of how important it is to our customers. It's in recognition of how important it is to the continent of Africa, the implications, and Elizabeth talked to some of that, and so did Goy, but also in just from a global perspective. Climate change is an issue that we all face together as the world, and I think it's important that we all do our small part to contribute to a much wider initiative.
Great. So what I'm taking away from this session is that we need to create a lot more awareness. Without the awareness, green bonds, REIT, whatever, people would not just get it. They won't be able to appreciate it. So that's one aspect that we need to work hard on, educate the populace on why these are needed. And then also for developers that want to be as successful as Acorn in this endeavor, they should be ready to go for the long haul. They should be patient. They shouldn't think that after just a few months in the business, they would also be that successful. Yeah, so it's needed. And then I also got from one grade that you need the right partners. You need the right partners. You should have a proper strategy in place, and you should be able to get a proper mix of that capital. And I think Wagi also mentioned the institutional level thinking. It's very, very important here. So yes, and then we would also need the financial institutions to come up with innovative products, because sometimes the products are not structured in a way that are able to help developers that want to go green. So if we're able to get more innovative products, it would also help push the market. Right. Thank you so much, all my panelists, for this interesting session. And I hope our audience enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.